When he got on a plane in Portland, Oregon last night, he was just another passenger who gave his name as D.A. Cooper. But today, after hijacking a Northwest Airlines jet, ransoming the passengers in Seattle, then making a getaway by parachute somewhere between there and Reno, Nevada, the description on one wire service, master criminal. Bill Curtis reports.
36 passengers got off the jetliner in Seattle last night. Left aboard 4 crew members and the hijacker, dressed in a business suit demanding $200,000 and carrying a plain briefcase which he told the crew held explosives. With the full ransom collected from Seattle banks and 4 parachutes aboard, the plane headed for Reno. It took 3.5 hours, slow for a jet, but the hijacker had given detailed flight instructions. The rear stairwell was open all the way. It arrived at Reno in shreds. The crew, here being debriefed by the FBI, was told to fly low over Oregon's flatlands with the flaps down. The speed dropped to 200 miles per hour. Somewhere, the hijacker parachuted away with the money. The crew had little to say.
We gave the information to the authorities, and we just don't want to discuss it any further.
Have you been told by the FBI not to discuss?
No, they handle their investigation, and my company would rather have it released through them.
Tina, were you with the rest of the crew during the flight after you left the ground the last time?
Yes, I went up to the cockpit.
None of you were within sight of the hijacker, right?
Right. We already talked about it, and the captain.
How did you surmise that he was not on the plane when he landed in Reno?
Smith says, somebody get a towel. He's bleeding to death. I said, fuck him. He just tried to kill me.
And when he asked you about providing aid, you said, f*** him, he tried to kill me.
Right, I was wrapped up in the rest of the case.
Joe Smith says, somebody get a towel. He's bleeding to death. I said, fuck him. He just tried to kill me.
My name is Dan Grider, and this is part 2 of my amateur video documentary on the subject of D.B. Cooper. So we might as well get to know each other right now, and I want you to know I'm not a lawyer or a government employee, and I don't work for anybody, and I don't get paid. I'm just a dad that cares, and I don't monetize this content, so you don't have to see advertisement in it. And the music on here is all my own, so there's no copyright problems. I don't really write this music out. I can just kind of hear the music and the beat in my head, like this. just a guy with a cell phone and a guitar, but I am a pilot, and I'm fairly good with airplanes and parachutes. This story's been a 20-year quest for me, but as of today, it's over. I produced part 1 of this video where my quest was to find out who D.B. Cooper was and why he did it, and I figured all that out. Richard Floyd McCoy was D.B. Cooper, and that guy had served his country in Vietnam 2 combat tours, first in Special Forces, and the second as a chopper pilot. But when he came home from his second tour, our reception as Americans was disgraceful. Richard was spit upon as a Vietnam vet and told that even with a college degree, he could never get hired into law enforcement. He needed some resolve. Yes, resolve. So this isn't a crime story. This is a love story. This is a story of an American vet that served his country but was forced into a corner of bad decisions. When Richard hijacked Flight 305 that night, he selected the highly modified military olive drab green NB-8 rig supplied by Earl Cossey. This rig would have looked very enticing to me as well. After all, it had a ripcord on the right side, and most important, it had cape wells in case a cutaway from the main chute would become necessary after landing. So this is my story of the finding of the actual D.B. Cooper rig and Richard's actual jump logbook and Larry's matching jump logbook. Larry Patterson was Richard's best friend in 1971, and he was also his skydiving instructor. But now, the even larger mystery looming. Since Richard McCoy did in fact do both hijackings, why does the FBI not want to talk about this? So I've been crawling through these forests and rummaging everywhere trying to figure this one out. This secret is even deeper. This is deep FBI secrets. There are 2 amazing events associated with the understanding of the FBI secret. One was finding the actual D.B. Cooper parachute and the jump logs, but the other was a cold call that came in from Nick O'Hara one day and my digital recording of that call. It wasn't until I interviewed Nick on camera that I fully understood the FBI secret in place even to this day. The FBI murdered Richard in cold-blooded, premeditated assault. They traded Melvin Walker's freedom for helping arrange the kill. FBI was inside that house, no search warrant, and Nick shot him point blank with his own personal weapon that he brought to the scene as a collector's item. Deep FBI secrets. You're about to see this story unfold. This is my website where you can support my work. I'm trying to build a network of pilots and planes where we can get animals out of kill shelters in the time of crisis. I'm not a nonprofit, so keep your donations small, but your support for these efforts and my travels is very helpful. I don't need much to get stories like this figured out, but let's get to the story. It's time to meet Larry Patterson.
I can see that's my writing here.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't sign it, it's my writing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you figured it all out.
See, the interesting thing is that he's got all these parachute jumps. He's got 8 jumps logged prior to D.B. Cooper. He does all those jumps in preparation for his November hijacking, and then there's nothing in here until just before the April hijacking of United 855, 17 March of 72, Alta, Utah, Cessna 182. You gave
so that was up in Alta then, wasn't it?
Yep. So before his second hijacking, you put him out again. He needed one more warm-up.
Yeah, he sure pulled one over on me.
He did. Well, he pulled one over on everybody.
Well, that's okay if he does it on everybody else. I don't take that personally. Listen, I do.
He pulled it over on the whole world.
Yeah.
He faked out everybody, including the entire United States FBI.
Yeah, all 7,000 of them.
All 7,000 of them. Never figured out that was Richard that did that?
We dropped the ball because it was more than just Ralph. He was the responsible guy, but you got 8,000 agents out there who are also kind of looking at the same case. And
the actual D.B. Cooper parachute was in his mother's storage, buried and hidden in a facility not very far away from where the logbook was. So it took us a long time to find those, but I mean, what are the odds that Richard Floyd McCoy's mother would have a U.S. military NB-8 harness and container in her? That has to be the rig.
About all of it.
They're very, very supportive and into everything.
To find out if it was. I'm trying not to mess them up because they're all old. Okay, that's not the one. But these are letters. These are letters from the 50s, early 50s.
Wow.
Frank Hines. I mean, look at some of that. I mean, while you look at that, I'm gonna see if I.
Okay.
I don't know what happened. She was that one of them?
No.
That's the one.
Not sure.
Will there be a number on the parachute to verify?
Yes. Here's the rig right here.
There's the rig.
This is the D.B. Cooper rig right here. This is it.
What's that?
I don't know. Cope City.
I never heard of that. AC or AJ. That motor was a trick in itself. Oh, look.
Richard Floyd McCoy. Yep. Yeah, well, this right here is what I've been looking for 20 years. You know what this is?
Yeah, that's supposedly the one he jumped out with the first time.
This is the D.B. Cooper parachute.
And how would you prove that, though?
Well,
that's my whole always trying to, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is we just solved it. Literally. This is the rig because they know what rig he used when he jumped that night.
Right.
They supplied him the rigs,
Right.
so they know what they supplied him. This is the rig that he used. After I produced that first documentary, you and I didn't know each other, but you contacted me via phone, and you had seen my documentary, and you were pretty cold. You had something to tell me right off the bat. Tell me what your opinion was at that time. When you first contacted me, I proposed that Richard Floyd McCoy was D.B. Cooper, and what did you tell me?
I didn't believe he was. I had seen your document, very well done, very good, very impressive, but I just did not believe that Richard had anything to do with the original hijacking.
I know. And I took your phone call, and I said, thank you. I've got some work to do.
You're very nice.
When I first talked to you, you called me.
I remember that.
You called me, and I'll never forget, you wanted to set me straight. Richard Floyd McCoy was not D.B. Cooper.
Yeah, I remember that. And I was really sure of it.
Yeah.
You know, I was just sure of it, but, you know, you've convinced me beyond doubt that he was.
Yeah, I remember talking to you on the phone, and I thought, boy, this is going to be a tough one.
Yeah.
Larry Patterson, I'm not going to change Larry's mind. I'm going to have to show Larry all this stuff. Larry's going to be the toughest sell out there.
Yeah. Richard really suckered me good.
Yeah. So now, based on the fact that we found that rig, it matches the description exactly. It's a modified NB8 with the ripcord moved from this side to this side. The pack tray is modified, the cape wells are modified, the ripcord is modified. That is the modified olive drab green NB8 that was described to have been used by the hijacker that night. Based on all of that, now what's Larry's opinion on where we're at?
I've had a change of heart. I hate to admit it, but Richard, it's really looking like he's D.B. Cooper. You've proved he is.
And we're going to look at this logbook. The ironic thing is, this is your logbook. It's a little bit lighter colored, and on this particular date in here, just prior to the D.B. Cooper jump, you've got Richard's name in your logbook, but in Richard's logbook, he's got 39 military static line jumps prior to his civilian jumps. Now, when he came to you, he wanted to learn how to do civilian free fall, exit, and pulling your own ripcord. Richard has those logs. Those jumps are logged in his logbook, and on this page here, whose signature is this in the summer before D.B. Cooper? Whose signature is that?
That's my signature of training him on free fall back in August and September of 1971.
August and September of 71, he made a total of 8 practice free fall jumps.
Yeah.
Unbeknownst to you. You had no idea. And then finally, there's a long break after the D.B. Cooper hijacking. You guys didn't jump together again until just a few weeks before the April 72 hijacking, and he went back out and he made one more practice jump out of a 182. That's not signed off, but it's likely you. It's still Alta. It's still a 182. There's no signature on it, which might have meant that he's just a solo jump, but he made one more practice jump right here in Salt Lake City just prior to the April 72 hijacking.
Right. I believe that's his writing. That's not mine. And yeah, it's definitely not mine there, but I believe that's his writing. But yeah, he made, he's logged a jump there.
Yeah. And Larry, that means that you were the personal trainer for D.B. Cooper.
Yeah, it kind of looks that way. It wasn't the intention as training was D.B. Cooper, but it looks like he used me to get some experience in exiting an aircraft in free fall and being stable.
And that's what he was going to need to do. You didn't know it at the time, but you enabled Richard to become D.B. Cooper, and then he came back down here to the Salt Lake City Basin area, resumed life. No one had any idea. The whole world was looking up in the Pacific Northwest for this mysterious man out there in the woods, and he was down here in your same guard unit with you, carrying on day to day. No one ever knew anything. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
The perfect disguise.
I lent that paracommander to Richard. He asked me if he could borrow my parachute to learn how to pack. It wasn't packed when I give it to him. I'd come home from jumping, and probably the only time in my life I ever brought an unpacked parachute home. But he asked if he could learn how to pack it over at the BYU club. And so that's how we wound up with that. He took it down to the BYU club, and Andy showed him how to pack it. And that's how he wound up using my parachute.
Yeah, BYU parachute. Andy Baggs packed it up on a Wednesday night, and he went and hijacked an airplane on Saturday night. Andy, you're with Shantae. Tell me what this parachute is right here.
This is the parachute owned by Larry Patterson of Lehigh at the time, and this is the parachute I packed at my office at BYU. And on Wednesday night before Richard used it, Shantae was a little tiny girl running up and down my packing table while I showed Richard how to pack it. So I put it together. He told me he had a big jump on the weekend, and that was the weekend he hijacked his plane. I packed the parachute. This is it.
How many years has it been since you and Shantae and this parachute have been together?
One was a hijacking,
50 years.
50 years. 50 years ago. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's been
50 years ago when
yeah. Show me the
baby Cooper jumped.
Show me the ripcord on here. Where's the ripcord on this thing?
Ripcord comes, it's attached to the chest harness. So this is the ripcord. And then there's a reserve, no, he doesn't have a pick system. This is the actual ripcord that Richard pulled. And these are called a shot and a half releases. You pop this down, and there's a cable under there that you put your thumb in that pops out, and you're free.
Yeah, this is the original ripcord. Got returned with the rig. That's the same one that was on it that night. Isn't that amazing?
This has not been in the air since his jump.
Yeah, has not been jumped. Isn't that amazing? The FBI, when I interviewed them last week, Nick O'Hara, who ended up being a pretty prominent figure in FBI, he's the guy that actually shot and killed Richard with a shotgun blast, and his interview was conducted here this week. Nick told me in no uncertain terms, Ralph Hemmelsbach dropped the ball, the FBI dropped the ball. Here's a Nick quote that you're not going to be able to get out of. Nick O'Hara said, "We dropped the ball, FBI dropped the ball, no doubt about it, and you can quote me on that."
Oh, I think we did. Yeah. Well, because Ralph is the FBI.
Yeah.
And if he dropped the ball, we, as an agency, you live and you die together.
Yes.
I mean, you're looking good or you're looking bad.
And his suggestion was, now based on this new evidence, these new logbooks, your logbook, Richard's logbook, and the parachute that we found in Cove City, North Carolina, he says FBI should close this case and cancel the John Doe warrant. How would you feel if this case was finally closed and the FBI publicly closed this case?
Well, it's really about time. It's been open 50-something years. They've done no good on it. You've solved it all. You've put it all together. You've got all the evidence. And they shouldn't close it.
Close it. Close it, solved. Close it, thanks to you. Not thanks to us, because we didn't do a very good job.
Close it, solved.
That would be my suggestion.
The NB8 parachute in the early days of skydiving was a bailout rig only. It's an emergency rig. It's a standard issue, and it packs up like this, and all the pins on here are on the back. So when you pull this ripcord, it pulls those pins, but it's designed to be an easy pull. So when you pull this thing, it's actually pulling this, and it releases. Now the Cossie rig, the actual DB Cooper rig, has been modified. This cable got moved to this side. The ripcord is over here, and that's how come we know it's the correct one. Cossie, in this book here, describes exactly the rig that's missing and how he modified it. The problem with this rig is that there's not enough volume here to put the parachute that Cossie wanted in here. This is called a packing tray, so he had to enlarge it. So on the rig that you're going to see later today, the actual DB Cooper rig, it's been modified. The packing tray has been enlarged. The cable is moved over to here. The ripcord is now mounted here. That's how we identify which rig got used that night. Every other NB8 in the world looks like this. This is unmodified. So here's the two rigs side by side. This is a military NB8 with no cape wells, so you can't cut it away, and it's got the ripcord on this side. Now this is the McCoy rig found on the McCoy farm, and notice it's been modified. It has cape wells installed for quick cutaway, and then also it's got the ripcord moved. Formerly it was over here. It's been moved to be a right side deploy. This sleeve, this pouch that it goes in, should be over here like it is on this rig. It's not supposed to be over here. It's supposed to be here. So that tells us that this is the Earl Cossie modified rig as described by Earl, what he delivered to Flight 305 that night. Now here's a detailed look at the back of this thing. This is the outside view. See this darker green area? This is put on by Cossie. Now I've got it on the inside. This is an inside view. That parachute cord in the background is unrelated. It's just for show. This is the inside seam, and look at the stitch work on this. This is the section that Cossie added to make this packing tray a little bit larger so he could hold a sport rig in there. Now I'm going to show you the up-close detailed pictures of video of this stitching. Cossie was not good. Look at how terrible the stitching. This is not a factory job. This is Cossie's modification to this rig to add this section of fabric in there. Earl Cossie is mentioned in this book right here. I've got 3 books I want to talk about that tell us about DB Cooper, and I'm going to recommend them. My friend Bruce Smith wrote this book. This is DB Cooper and the FBI. Tremendous amount of good information on here, specifically the information on Cossie, FBI, and what is the rig that we're looking for. All the detailed information. Bruce Smith took the time to interview Cossie. Earl Cossie is dead now, but all the information from Bruce on those interviews and the FBI information on what is the rig. The 2 back rigs that we're looking for, one of them got left on the airplane. The other one was used and has never been seen since until I found it. That rig is described in detail. The way that we can tell that we found the DB Cooper rig is because of the modifications. Those modifications are described immaculately by Bruce Smith in his book. I recommend that you buy the book. Take a look at that if you're interested. A lot of good other information in here. The other book I want to tell you about is written by my friend Robert Edwards. Robert's a Brit from England, and he lives across the pond. He did a great job on this book here, and I want to tell you that this book right here is probably one of the better written books on the market today. Well worth the money. Robert sent me a free copy of it, but I didn't get a copy of it until after I had already made my parachute jump. Robert and I agree within a few feet on the flight path and the jump location where the hijacker on Northwest 305 left the aircraft at. We agree exactly on that, and Robert did a great job. Robert doesn't go into detailing who he thinks the hijacker was. He just gives you all the scientific information about the weather, the wind, the flight path, all that detailed information. He did a great job. The other book, of course, is DB Cooper, The Real McCoy, written by the 2 government guys, Rhodes and Kalam. I got the book signed here by both these guys. I've also got a signature in this book from every other single player in the DB Cooper case, an original signature. I've got everybody's signature except Richard Floyd McCoy, so I'll never get to that one, but I've got his kids in here, which is just as good. The other 2 books I want to tell you about are these books right here. These are the log books of the 2 people in question here. This is Richard Floyd McCoy's jump logbook. This is Larry Patterson's logbook. Larry Patterson was the guy in Salt Lake City. Richard and Larry were best friends. They were skydivers. They were both pilots. Larry Patterson is the guy that taught Richard Floyd McCoy to free fall. The act of free falling out of an airplane was done by Larry Patterson in the summer of '71. Richard Floyd McCoy got 8 parachute jumps under Larry's instruction. Larry was a skydiving instructor. These 2 books sync up exactly. These 2 books tell the exact story on Larry's involvement. Larry's only problem was at the time he had no idea that Richard Floyd McCoy had conjured up this idea to go hijack an airplane for money. Larry didn't know that. But now that he's seen the books and seen the rig and seen everything else, now he can tell you that is exactly what happened. So a couple other misconceptions we want to get to concerning D.B. Cooper. A couple questions that have always come up. The question about the fuel truck. I mentioned the fuel truck in D.B. Cooper, Deep Family Secrets Part 1. The fuel truck location was very important because there's 2 airplanes, 2 hijackings. In the first one, Northwest 305, the hijacker asked for the fuel truck to be located 100 feet to the left of the nose of the aircraft. That's fine. On the second one, he asked for the fuel truck to be located at the 10 o'clock position as viewed from the left rear of the aircraft. 10 o'clock and 50 yards. Well, 50 yards is 150 feet. 10 o'clock position is a 60-degree angle off the fuselage of the aircraft. 60 degrees at 150 feet puts you at the exact same spot that 100 feet directly to the left does. Here's the diagram for that. Only one person in the world could have known that those 2 locations were the exact same thing. Richard Floyd McCoy used feet in one, he used yards in the other. He asked for the position of the fuel truck to be exactly the same, although the FBI has said that information was never released to the public. It's impossible for a copycat to have copied that information because it was never released. There's no way another skyjacker could ask for that fuel truck to be located in precisely the same location because of the way that Richard did that. He designed that. I really think that Richard pulled out a pencil and did the math on that, but it came out to the exact same space, and it worked. They parked the fuel truck in the exact same spot, even though he asked for it 2 completely different ways. Isn't that interesting? Now let's go on and take a look at Radachek. Bill Radachek was the co-pilot that night. He's a friend of mine, lives in Minneapolis. This is Bill Radachek. So I got 2 things to tell you, and I want you to listen to Bill Radachek's quote. This is actually Bill talking here. The question I always get was, wasn't it stormy, icy, terrible, can't jump, insane conditions to jump out of an airplane? No, it wasn't actually that cold, and it wasn't that big of a deal. Could you see the ground as you came over Portland? Let's ask Bill Radachek, the co-pilot that night. Let's ask him that question.
Right.
They had 102s.
Right.
They couldn't stay in the air.
No.
And they were astern on their way through. Finally, they got out, and then they brought in a 130.
When you came over the top of Portland, could you see Portland at all? Could you see down?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There was some undercast, but we were in an icing condition.
Right.
And that probably gave us more worry once we decided this guy, as stable as a nut can be.
Right.
The top off the pressure cooker almost popped off twice.
Right.
But fortunately it did.
But you could see Portland when you came over the top of Portland.
Yeah. Yeah, by that time he was gone.
Yeah, he was gone. By the time you get to Portland, he was gone. The other question I always get is, what was the bank bag that was brought on board the airplane? It was not the knapsack that the skydiver wanted that night. You were telling me one time that when they brought the money on board, that whoever the skyjacker was all upset because you didn't bring him any bags or anything to put it in.
Oh, well, it was in, he wanted it in a knapsack.
Right.
Of course, nowadays everybody knows what a knapsack is. Every kid in preschool carries a knapsack.
Right.
Well, at that time, knapsacks weren't very well known.
Right.
The money was brought in a leather satchel. It was a rough weave fiber.
But not very sturdy?
No, it was very solid, and it had shoulders on it, a leather shoulder with a handle.
Right.
And the 200 grand was in there, and it weighed about 22 pounds or something like that.
Right.
And he was upset because, of course, he wanted to put the knapsack on.
Right.
And then one of the parachutes.
Right.
And that's one of at least 2 times that he threatened to
blow up there,
make an early departure for us.
Right. Right.
The other time was when the time came and went that he told us he wanted us on the ground to pick the money up.
Right.
And that came and went by about 45 minutes, and We were actually waiting for the. We had the money, but we didn't have the chutes.
The hijacker wanted something canvas, sturdy, with D-rings that he could snap, click, click to himself that would securely mount that 22-pound bag of money to himself. He didn't get it. He had to cut about 80 feet of parachute cord off one of the other parachutes and build himself a makeshift binding device that did not work. Ironically, he jumped directly over the Columbia River. That money, most of the money went directly in the river. That explains how come it washed downstream. Some of it was found later on the shores of Tina Bar. That explains exactly how that happened. It simply went down, took 8 or 9 years, and somebody randomly happened to find a little bit of the money. Brian Ingram in 1980 found a little bit of the money. That's how the money got there. He jumped out over the bridge in Portland, and it washed downstream, and that's where that thing ended up. Let's take a look at a couple other things here. I got a friend named Johnny Searles. He's the police officer in State Patrol in North Carolina. He was on duty when the bank got robbed in North Carolina. Let's take a look at Johnny's interview. I've got one interview with Johnny that's going to tell you about the apprehension, the attempted apprehension of Walker and Richard Floyd McCoy. Him and Walker were joined at the hip for all of them.
Every bit of it. Yeah.
Every bit of it. Walker's right there in the middle of it.
With him, yeah.
So Walker's got all his previous crime rap sheets that put him in prison in the first place, plus his prison break, plus stealing the car in Pennsylvania.
Interstate
flight, plus all of these bank robberies that he did with Richard. And after being apprehended, he ends up with 7 years.
I don't get it. I don't get it. He got 7 years. He got 7 years in North Carolina just for stealing the car.
Yes.
Much less being charged with everything he was charged with was federal crimes.
Yes.
There's no good time off for federal crimes. You got to serve day for day.
The only way to get good time off that I know of is to cut a deal with the federal government, and they are in the deal-making business.
Exactly.
They wanted McCoy, and Walker gave them the intel that they had to have to be at the date, time, and place where McCoy was going to show up.
But that, as I said earlier, that coincides with exactly what Richard Kalami told me.
Yes.
That Walker made friends with the FBI.
Yeah.
He told them everything.
Yeah.
Kalami told me that.
I think it's time to go see Mr. O'Hara. You and I have talked a couple times about the stuff that you can't talk about, and you've been very clear to tell me that you can't tell me how you knew Melvin Dale Walker and Richard Floyd McCoy are going back to this very discreet, unknown location in Virginia Beach at this particular time on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
Where that information came from.
That's right. We were all told not to ever discuss it, and we never have.
And we can honor that. I just want to tell you up front, Nick, the thing that I'm seeing there that doesn't make any sense is the correlation between the only person in the world who could have known the track path as accurately as the FBI did was Melvin Dale Walker. And you have previously told me that there was 0 wiretappings involved.
None. No.
You didn't tap any wires.
No.
You didn't intercept any phone calls.
No.
So without that, the only way FBI could get track information could have only come from Melvin Dale Walker. I don't see how Karen would have even known. The wife, they're traveling. How could she have known those immaculate movements right down to the minute?
Well, we were there 3 days, so
right.
we had an address. We didn't know where they were.
Right.
We didn't know where they were. And we didn't, but my opinion was we're waiting until they come back, because they're coming back. Because they'd rented this house. It was full of brand new furniture, the guns all over. They were comfortable there. They'd been there a while. And I knew they were coming back.
Yeah.
And they did. I was convinced I felt strongly they were coming back. Nobody knows for sure because they could have been stopped on the road, but my guess was we're going to wait until they come back.
Yeah.
So we did.
You were camped out in there waiting.
3 days.
Wednesday,
Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Yep.
7 years for bank robbery, and when you add interstate flight, armed robbery, larceny, theft of a motor vehicle, escape from a federal prison. No, that's.
When you total up Walker's complete rap sheet, including all the crimes that he committed prior to even meeting Richard Floyd McCoy, plus grand theft auto, breaking out of a federal prison, 4 more bank jobs afterwards, what should have been his crime? What should have been his punishment in terms of years afterwards? What would be a good guess?
Minimum 50.
Yeah.
You've got they took hostages.
Yeah.
The people when he stole the car, he tied them up. They took hostages there.
Yeah.
You're 50, 75 years. Easy.
He wasn't coming out.
Easy.
So how do you explain, as you being a law enforcement officer now retired, how do you explain Walker's complete rap sheet and everything that occurred, and yet he's a free man walking the street with no obligations to society 7 years after Richard Floyd McCoy gets killed?
There's a deal cut somewhere. You got to cut a deal. Federal time is real time. There's no time off for good behavior. No such thing in federal prison. You serve day for day. If you get 7 years, you serve 7 years. If you get 50 years, you serve 50 years. There's no good behavior or anything like that.
I also asked Johnny about the possibility of carrying a non-government issue service weapon on a stakeout or anything like that, and using it in a shooting. And this is what Johnny has to say about the fact. Remember, Nick used his own personal shotgun, which he still owns to this day. That's the gun that he brought to the killing. That's the gun that he used. That's the gun that you see in the interview with Nick O'Hara. All right, so man, Johnny Searles, I got one more question for you. This is a big one. This is huge. Tell me how long you've been in law enforcement in some capacity.
52 years.
52 years.
Yep.
In all that time, in your official capacity, have you ever been out on the job, acting in an official capacity on the job, and carried a service weapon that was not government issue, your own personal service weapon?
Absolutely not. Absolutely 100% never, wouldn't do it. Highway Patrol policy says you will not do that, so you'd be violating policy if you did.
Yeah, so here's the rest of the story on the weapon that was used to kill Richard Floyd McCoy that night. That weapon was a 12-gauge shotgun. It was a personal shotgun owned by O'Hara, given to him by his wife for his birthday. He carried it to the scene in order to kill Richard. It was a non-government issue weapon.
Trophy kill.
He should have been disciplined at some point for that. That's you don't do that. You just don't do that.
After Richard had been shot with this personal weapon, Richard Floyd McCoy fell backwards and he said, "I'm hit." But the other agent rushed over to him and said, let's give him aid. And O'Hara said, "Absolutely not."
I've read that somewhere. I don't know where, but I've read the same thing.
And what do you think of police government policy on rendering aid to somebody that's already been hit?
I don't care how bad, what dislike you have. You've got to save a life if you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you do everything above and beyond. No matter what the situation is, you go above and beyond to save a life.
So O'Hara shot this man in surprise, where he didn't have any idea that he knew it was coming from. He used his own personal weapon as a trophy weapon that's still on display in his office to this day. And after he was already down, he refused to render aid.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Unbelievable.
So you and I talked about, you said, my favorite gun is a shotgun, and the shotgun I shot him with was one my wife bought him for my birthday. So typically on a raid, I carry a shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
This one was a personal gun. This is the gun that your wife bought you for your birthday.
Correct.
But you carried it with you on this particular raid. and you used?
I always had it in my trunk.
You always had that in your trunk?
Yeah, because to take a bureau issue weapon out, you had to sign it out and all that. And I was so active out there in the street that you never knew when you were going to need it. So she bought me that, and it was in the trunk.
Yeah. You know, my phone rang, and it was an unusual phone call. I got a phone call from Nick O'Hara. He's the FBI agent that killed Richard Floyd McCoy. When he called me, I did my very best to befriend Nick. I set him up. I told him that I believed that Karen, Richard Floyd McCoy's wife, had been the tipster and tipped off the FBI, and that's what Nick wanted to hear. So my next premonition is that Karen tipped off the FBI as to exactly where that house was.
I can't say, because we promised 50 years ago not to disclose where it came from, but you've got good instincts. You've got very good instincts.
Yeah, well, it has to be. I mean, there's no other way to land with that specific of information. Karen had to have given up that information.
Well, I've made my promise. I can't. Bernie bugged me for years. Nick, tell me. Nick, tell me. And he passed away, and I would have told him if I'd been down there when he was ready to go, but I just,
yeah.
You know, it's just one of those things. So,
yeah.
But you're damn close.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this, Dan, don't give me up. The only detail you don't have are the details of how it happened.
Right.
I mean, so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the information got relayed, but all in all, I know that Karen provided enough information to somebody somehow. It led to Nick trusting me to do a personal in-person interview on camera with audio, and we eventually did that. Before I did the interview, I got Nick to sign away legal documents prepared by my attorney that waived his right to recant later on and to use both his telephone conversation and the video recordings for my own personal use and publication. And Nick signed those in ink with witnesses, and it's on a legal document. I have that. And so Nick's telephone call is legal. The video interview that you're about to see with Nick, and I'm about to get fired up about Nick's interview. Nick is a cold-blooded killer. Nick was a member of the FBI, and the FBI only wanted Richard Floyd McCoy dead, and they accomplished that. Let's go take a look at Nick O'Hara's interview. You also said I was in the best position. I was in charge of the operation. Mine hit him square.
Yep.
You used this weapon, and you hit him square.
Mm-hmm.
I pulled the autopsy report from this, and there's the autopsy report is written very unusual. And I had a certified forensic pathologist review the autopsy report, and he gave me this 12-page summary of it. But this is a today's forensic pathologist reviewing an autopsy conducted that many years ago. Mm-hmm. But the autopsy then was written very non-standard. It didn't use proper anatomical terms. It was vague, and the main thing that really jumped out at this individual was that the shot that came from this thing was very, very close. The packing wad was found inside the cavity of the chest, and the actual gunpowder, the gray residual was there. So what kind of distance are you thinking here?
Probably like, say I was standing here.
Yep.
And he would have been like where the window is, maybe 10 feet, maybe 12.
Right.
Because he was partway in the door.
Right. And then after the shot went off, Joe Smith asked you a question. Tell me about that aspect of it. You hit him and you fell back in the bushes, and then what?
Well, we didn't know. I didn't know that Marty and Kevin had shot, because it sounded like one shot to me.
Right.
He shot, we shot. I told him, come in, be quiet. FBI, come in, be quiet, you're under arrest. He shot, we shot, he said, I'm killed, and then he just like disappeared. So we go to the front door, Joe turns the front light on, and we look, and there he is in the bushes. Joe gets down there, and
Joe Smith says, somebody get a towel. He's bleeding to death. I said, fuck him. He just tried to kill me.
We don't know. In the book, Bernie says, we knew it was McCoy. No. He said, we knew it was McCoy when he stood in the door. No, we didn't, because he was backlit, and I knew it was one of the two guys, and once he shot,
right,
we do what we do.
Right. Then
he disappeared. We opened the door, we find him in the bushes, and he's obviously not going to make it. And at that time, Joe says, get some towels, he's bleeding to death. And then I responded, whatever.
Joe Smith says, somebody get a towel. He's bleeding to death. I said, fuck him. He just tried to kill me.
The funny thing is, the autopsy report shows where the wound actually hit was mostly shoulder, upper shoulder, very little to do with the heart or the lung. It barely nicked an artery, causing some blood loss, but definitely would have been savable with first aid and the forensic.
Oh, I don't think so.
No?
No way. You had 9 holes in the guy. You had every double-aught buck went right through him.
This guy says, after study of the autopsy report and the photographs provided, I offer my conclusion is that yes, he could have been saved. Richard Floyd McCoy died a slow death from combination of blood.
No, that's not true.
Filling chest cavity. This is his report, making heart function impossible, as well as a slow loss of blood. The wound was in no way life-threatening and could have been treated with basic first aid. I estimate that it took 45 minutes in total for this person to die.
Oh, that's bullshit.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. He was dead, laying in the ground. His blood and his bone chips were coming out of that, oozing out of that wound. And I looked at him. I knew he was gone. So I went on with my stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
He wasn't breathing. He wasn't doing nothing. He was done.
Yeah. The autopsy report, boy, it didn't hit anything critical. It barely nicked a vein right here, so there was blood loss. But the lung and heart were perfectly intact, and that's why I wonder who wrote this report. And
good question. I didn't go to. Mike Robinson went to the autopsy. I didn't go because I was writing reports and doing a search warrant.
Yeah.
And Mike went to the autopsy.
Yeah.
But I remember that it was lower down than where he talks about high on the shoulder.
Yeah, it's right here. So the chest is down here, the lung stops here, and it's almost a shoulder wound. And it did penetrate here, but the forensic pathologist who looked at these pictures and that report labeled this a point blank shot.
No, it was across the room.
Across the room. Yeah, due to the pattern and the buckshot and everything like that, he estimated the barrel of the gun to have been less than 2 feet.
Oh, that's not even close.
No,
it was at least 12 feet.
Yeah.
So and he's standing in the doorway. I'm standing at the other doorway.
Yeah.
Across the room. So that that he can have his opinion. I was there. I know.
Yeah.
And he was wrong. He's wrong.
Yeah, that's something I just always wondered about. But I did a lot of study on the autopsy and the body and the report, and there's nothing critical in this area right here that would actually kill a person.
Oh, he's bleeding big time.
Yeah.
Blood chips, bone chips, blood coming out of it.
Yeah.
And I looked at him. I knew he was gone.
Yeah.
45 minutes, no way.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't there. I was there.
Yeah. 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 And here's the other thing. Nick O'Hara had a previous relationship with Walker. Walker was arrested by Nick O'Hara. They knew each other. Nick sent him to prison the first time when he broke out from Lewisburg, so they knew each other. Nick cuts a deal with Walker. Walker talks and feeds him information, and that's how Nick and the FBI knew exactly what house to be in, where, what the schedule is, and what time they're going to be pulling in. They actually knew who was going to walk up to the door first. We recreated the scene. I want you to see this. I've got the autopsy. I took Richard Floyd McCoy's son, Rick, back to the location, and I filmed this. This is an 870 shotgun coming out of the same door on the same steps at the same angle. Let's take a look at this. This is a recreation of the killing.
I'll give him a call, let him know what's up. And I guess you just call me?
Yeah, just give me 5 minutes here and see what happens.
Okay. All right, yeah. It'll probably be a minute, so I'm gonna get out. We'll just park here and get out. Chill. I don't want to be stuck up in this car. Okay, got it. All right. No, we stay in that neighborhood. All right, see you in a second.
Hey, Ray.
They were already inside and it was dark, so he didn't even know. This is an ambush. As soon as he got to this steps, he got blown away.
There was a suspicion, right? Like he knew something was wrong.
Yeah, I just looked at the exit one. Like they're so tight. Like that was point blank. There's no spread on the exit either.
Right, yeah. As soon as the door opens and he's in.
Yeah, now put your hand on the door. There you go. There's what it is right there.
Yeah. So it went high shoulder and then came out right underneath the armpit.
Yep.
And actually towards the armpit, which is, yeah.
You can see the bruise under the armpit there.
Yeah. There's autopsy pictures of the exit wounds.
You know, I pulled the autopsy report, and it clearly says that the shotgun wound was from high to low and right to left. There's only one way to do that. He was shooting down the steps as Richard Floyd McCoy came up those steps. He got a shotgun blast point blank. I got the autopsy report. I'm going to put part of that on the screen. I also got this copy from a forensic doctor who looked at the autopsy report and the picture, and here's what he wrote. He said, after studying the autopsy report and the photographs provided, I offer my conclusion that yes, he could have been saved. Richard Floyd McCoy died a slow death from a combination of blood filling chest area, cavity area, making heart function impossible, as well as a slow loss of blood. The wound was in no way life-threatening and could have been treated with basic first aid. I estimate that it took 45 minutes in total for this person to die. I've got his name blanked out, of course. Now, you're not going to believe this, but the ambulance, after Richard Floyd McCoy gets shot and they refuse to offer him aid, the ambulance shows up. They sent the ambulance away. Why? Because Richard Floyd McCoy wasn't done dying yet. They sent the ambulance 4 houses down to park in a yard until Richard was for sure dead. Then they brought the ambulance back. Can you believe this? This is our government did this. In the very end, Myrtle, Richard Floyd McCoy's mother, wrote a letter of complaint to the FBI and to her senator wanting an investigation on all of this. She had all the pictures. She had all the information. Richard Floyd McCoy's mother knew the FBI murdered her son. She wrote a letter, and she got a letter back, the result of this. I'm going to read it to you right now. Here's what the thing actually says. I have looked into the allegations by Mrs. McCoy charging illegal and irregular acts by FBI agents during the above investigation. These allegations are completely false. The investigative efforts of all of the FBI personnel involved in this intensive investigation were in keeping with the responsibility of the FBI to locate wanted individuals. There was, therefore, no improper activity by FBI agents. It is being noted that the searches of residents were conducted with the consent of the owners, and all interviews were handled in a businesslike manner with no threats being made to Mrs. McCoy or members of her family. Sincerely, Clarence M. Kelly, director. This is the FBI director, writes a report to tell you that they didn't do anything wrong. Who gets to write the conclusion on whether or not there's any wrongdoing in the FBI? The FBI gets to write that report. Yes, we'll just write a letter and tell you we didn't do anything wrong. This is how the FBI operates. This, and I want to tell you up front, I'm not much of a fan of several things. I am a fan of good government. I am a fan of good FBI people. I am a fan of good police officers. When I can find good politicians, I'm a fan of that. We have to have good government. We have to have good politicians. We have to have good police officers. Whenever we find the bad ones, we've got to weed them out. In this case, this is bad FBI. There's some bad politicians out there. There's some bad lawyers. There's some bad people. There's corruption out there. We've got to find a better way to weed out the corruptness out of this. This is a corrupt FBI. This guy, Nick O'Hara, should be criminally charged with murder 1 for this. Premeditated murder 1. I'm going to show you finally the notch that Nick put in his gun. This is the stock of his .870 gun that he took to the killing that night because he had plenty of time to check out a service weapon, but he didn't. He took his own weapon there because he wanted to keep it. This is Nick's notch. He wants me to feel the notch that he notched into the handle of this .870 shotgun.
You keep track of what gun you used where.
Yeah. What's that? Oh, is that your 1 kill right there?
So the only reason I did that was so I'd know what gun it was.
Oh, I see. So you killed Richard with this and that's it?
That's it, yeah. I missed the other guy with it, damn it.
Yeah.
He was an outlaw. He's worse than McCoy. So Patrick says, Dad, I want that gun. Don't you do anything with that gun. I want that gun.
You know, there's been 3 FBI personnel involved in the D.B. Cooper case. Larry Carr, as of recently, the special agent in charge. I've got Larry's interview. And then, of course, Nick O'Hara, the guy that killed Richard Floyd McCoy. You've seen that interview. What about Ralph? My interviews with Ralph from 11 years ago. But whatever happened to Ralph? The other 2 guys are still alive. There's only been 3 FBI agents that were significant to this case the entire time. Took a long time to figure out where Ralph's gravesite was, but Ralph actually died 3 years ago, right about now. And Ralph is buried in Portland at this gravesite right here, Section 8, Plot 773. Ralph Purdy Himmelsbach, 2nd Lieutenant, U.S. Air Force, World War II. Born September 28, 1923, and he died October 1, 2019. This is where Ralph is today. That's the end of it for me on this one. It's been a long run. This has been a 20-year deal. My very best condolences to the entire McCoy family. I am very sorry for this. I recognize that Richard Floyd McCoy committed some crimes and some errors. I wish that the U.S. had treated him better upon his return from Vietnam. I wish he had not been backed into a corner. I wish that we had recognized the need that Richard had for some help. And I wish that America could recognize the individual and the American hero that Richard Floyd McCoy truly was. If you ever talk to anybody that actually knew Richard, he was a classic guy. He would help anyone. He was an American citizen. He was a veteran. He served our country. This is a U.S. vet that we treated like this, and we did not do a good job in finding this, fixing it, correcting it. We did not do a good job of helping Richard when he came back from Vietnam, and for that, I am truly sorry. This is not a crime story. This is a love story, and it's been my pleasure to be a part of telling this story on behalf of my friend, Richard Floyd McCoy. I got to get out of here and get this thing up and on the air. This is going to be a bloody one, but the story has to be told. I hope that you'll understand my position. For my tiny little itty-bitty fledgling YouTube channel, Dan Grider, probable cause. So this is the gravesite of D.B. Cooper, Richard Floyd McCoy. This is the final resting place of D.B. Cooper. Yes, he hijacked the Northwest airplane. Yes, he hijacked the United airplane. all of that stuff actually happened after Richard Floyd McCoy was murdered by the FBI in Norfolk that night. They had his funeral here in Cove City. His body was brought here and still lays here today. I'm actually sitting here just a few feet from the body of D.B. Cooper, Richard Floyd McCoy.
There's been a lot of speculation over the years. I thought that he, in the past, had possibly somewhere in the Washougal watershed had landed. I thought possibly the money had washed down the Washougal watershed and came eventually landing on our beach. And the reason I thought the Washougal watershed is because that's where the FBI had determined and done a lot of investigation to try and find evidence on D.B. Cooper. But after reading this book that you supplied me, D.B. Cooper, The Real McCoy by Mr. Rhodes, and studying that and looking at it, I think that probably makes more common sense to me as to what really happened, that Richard McCoy was D.B. Cooper, and that he had jumped off, as we both talk about this, in this general area, and the money landed in the river and ended up down here. So I think that's probably the most realistic, the most plausible scenario, that Richard McCoy was D.B. Cooper. I don't know for sure, but it sure looks that way from the evidence that that book presents. It's been what, 40 some years since this happened?
41.
41 years, yeah.
41 years.
There's things in that book that really point towards Mr. McCoy.
Yeah.
Really do.
I agree.
And he jumped out of another aircraft just months after the D.B. Cooper. You know, that book, he was what, just a few months later, he did it again in Utah, hijacked a plane. And in that book, you see similarities between how D.B. Cooper did his hijacking and how Richard McCoy did his hijacking. You see evidence that D.B. Cooper left behind in the Boeing plane that ties into Richard McCoy, and really that makes a whole lot of sense to me.
This pen doesn't work.
Put Fazio Farms or something like that. What's
Fazio Brothers.
Saying much. Yeah, you gotta find something else.
Yeah, no, we got this. We got this. So, thanks for hosting us here today.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for enjoying all the beers.
Oh, absolutely. And the guitar player. Did you hear the guitar player?
I did.
Holy cow! Whoever that guitar player was had it going on.
Yeah. Any of you guys? Was it none of you guys?
Guitar player?
No. Yeah. Yeah. None of these guys was the guitar player.
I don't know who the guitar player was. Anybody know? He was here. Who was the guitar player? Yeah, the guitar player was good. Whoever they got, the guitar player was here. All right, so what's your name?
I'm Todd Britt. I'm the brewmaster here at Victor 23.
And what, Victor 23, what's this got to do with? Like, was there a bank robbery or a car or something?
This was it's the only non-closed case for, aerial hijacking, in the U.S. So Victor 23 is the flight plan from Portland to Seattle that was hijacked by Dan Cooper, or D.B. Cooper, as his alias is.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, show us your beer. Yeah. This is really a great place, man.
So this is our bar right here. Have 10 to 11 beers on tap at all times. Your standards, we have a Pilsner named after one of the stewardesses that was on the flight.
What's the name of that?
Schaffner Pils.
Oh.
Flight 305, which was the flight number that he hijacked.
Right.
Skyjacker, kind of named after him in a fun way. And then everything else has some sort of either aviation theme or D.B. Cooper specific theme.
Yeah, that is very nice. We appreciate you letting us in here. I just got one question for you. Do you think D.B. Cooper has ever been here?
Oh, that'd be cool if he was.
If he was?
Oh, yeah. I got to imagine maybe he stepped in here to check it out.
Alive?
Oh, what's the math on that?
Well, 50
it's getting
years,
close, right?
50 years ago.
So he'd be, if he survived it all, probably, I would think so.
Well, and even if he was too old, it might be at some point in time, might have been his kids might have been here or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be crazy if it was. But I
Do you
mean,
guys think he told his kids?
I have no idea. Do you guys think he ever told his kids? Huh?
Maybe.
Maybe.
It's entirely possible.
I mean, the best way to keep a secret is not to tell anybody.